I couldn't believe what I was hearing. Here I am at a major Chamber of Commerce event, getting ready to receive an award, and Rhonda, to whom I've been married for 10 years, has just whispered in my ear that she's going to leave with Gerald, my business partner, for a weekend in Las Vegas to have sex right after the awards ceremony. "Are you out of your mind?" I asked quietly so no one else could hear me. "Only out of lust," she whispered back. "We need to talk," I told her. "But not right now. Later, after we get home from the ceremony." "No, Ron, I'm telling you how it's going to be," she said. "If you want to talk, you can throw me some ideas, or maybe remind me of things you've always wanted me to do with you but refused. I'll be home Monday night and we can talk then, if you still feel the need." It was the beginning of a 3-day weekend, and I knew she didn't have to go back to work until Tuesday. "And you conspired with him about this?" I asked quietly. "Of course," she said. "His wife knows too." I looked over and saw my soon-to-be ex-partner and friend sitting next to Rhonda with a smug grin on his face. I wanted to punch the bastard, but not here, not in front of all these people, these so-called pillars of society. I looked at Judy, his wife, who was sitting next to him. She didn't look too happy at all. Obviously, she knew it too. My thoughts were racing, but I focused back on the present when I heard the master of ceremonies call my name. I stood up, shook his hand, and accepted the award, holding it up for a second while the photographer took a picture. I gave my prepared acceptance speech, and at that moment I noticed Rhonda's hand resting on Gerald's lap. I decided to make impromptu changes to my speech. In my notes, I included a thank you to my wife, but ended my speech a little early without even mentioning her name. Instead, I thanked the community for their support and the house for the award, and then finished my speech. I didn't know if anyone would notice the disregard, but Rhonda mentioned it after I sat down again. "What? I'm not even worthy of mentioning?" she asked sarcastically as I took a sip of my already cooled drink. I just stared at her without saying a word. "So this is how it's going to be, huh? Well, like I said, we'll talk Monday night when I get back." Gerald stood up and headed for the podium, deliberately bumping into me on his way up. "If you get through this, don't bother coming back," I whispered to Rhonda as Gerald spoke. "There's nothing to come back to." To emphasize the point, I took the ring off my finger and held it out to her. She smirked, dropping it into her purse. "Do you know why I'm doing this?" she asked. "Of course you know that," she added. "This is for what you did to Judy. Don't lie to me. I know all about it. I have the pictures, so you won't say or do anything. Let me do this and we'll talk when I get back." "Don't do it, Rhonda," I said. "Nothing happened between Judy and me except dinner. We can talk about it after the ceremony." "It's too late," she said. "It has to happen. The tickets are already bought. The reservations are already made. I'm going to show Gerald my naked body this weekend. I'm going to let him do whatever he wants to me, and there's nothing you can say or do to stop me." "What if I tell you he's HIV positive?" I asked. She laughed. "I wouldn't believe you. You would say or do almost anything to keep me from going," she said. "Don't say I didn't warn you," I told her. "I guarantee that if you do, you'll regret it for the rest of your life. Look, just enjoy the weekend without me. Go play golf or something. When I get back, things will go back to the way they were," she said. I couldn't believe the woman's stamina. "No, it's not going to be the same, Rhonda," I told her. "We'll see about that," she said. A minute or two later, Gerald returned and took his seat. Rhonda turned to him, and I saw that she had put her hand in his lap again. Disgusted, I turned away from her. Finally, the event was over, and we got up to leave. "This is your last chance, Rhonda," I said. She and Gerald smirked, looking at me. "We're leaving, Ron," she said. "I could call you. Or not. Either way, I'll see you Monday." "No offense, partner," Gerald said. "I promise not to hurt her too much for your sake." "We're done, Gerald," I told him calmly. "As partners and friends, I never want to see or hear from you again." "We'll see about that, partner," he said, leading Rhonda away. I turned and looked at Judy, tears streaming down her face. "Do you need a ride home?" I asked her. She shook her head. "No, There's a cab coming for me, she said. Anyway, thanks for asking. Didn't you tell them that nothing happened between us? I asked. That it was just dinner and conversation. I tried, but they wouldn't listen, she said. Gerald has pictures of us at the restaurant, and Rhonda insists it was a prelude to an affair. You know how she is sometimes. Yeah, I did all right. Until now, the only complaint I had with Rhonda was her uncanny ability to act on false assumptions. And once she got something into her head, there was little anyone could do to change her mind. I see, I told her. I'm sorry, Ron, she said. You don't deserve this. I just hope he thought enough to grab the condoms. It doesn't matter, I said. Whether he uses a condom or not is irrelevant. The fact that she's going to let him fuck herself is all that matters. No, I'm done with both of them. What are you going to do? She asked. What I see fit, I told her. What about you? I told Gerald that if he goes through with it, I'll divorce him, she said. And that's exactly what I intend to do. It's not the first time he's cheated on me, but I swear to God it'll be the last. Good for you, I said. Let me know if there's anything I can do. If you want, I can refer you to a good lawyer. Thanks, Ron, she said. I appreciate it. With those words, she left, and I soon followed her back to the car. On the way home, I thought about the last 10 years I had spent with Rhonda. We were married about 5 years after Gerald and I went into business together. Gerald introduced me to her after we had been in business together for about 4 years. He and Judy had been married for 3 years by then. Rhonda and I dated, fell in love with each other, and got married. Gerald was the best man at our wedding, and I never would have believed he was capable of something like that. I never thought Rhonda would do something like that either. By the time we were married, the business had grown considerably. So my attorney suggested I ask her to sign a prenuptial agreement to protect my assets, including my home and business. She didn't like it, but signed anyway. I made sure the agreement was fair and included a marital infidelity clause. I had a lot to do, and I didn't have a lot of time to do it. When I got home, it was still pretty early, so I called my lawyer Jim Simpson on his cell phone. Hi, Ron, he said. I thought you and Rhonda would be celebrating your award tonight. What's going on? He listened as I told him what had happened earlier in the evening. Oh my God, Ron, I'm so sorry to hear that, he said when I was done. Do you want me to start drawing up the papers? Yes, Jim, I said. I want a divorce for treason based on our prenuptial agreement, and I want you to draw up the partnership dissolution papers. When Gerald and I drafted the partnership agreement, we included a clause that said the partnership could be dissolved if one or more of the partners engaged in morally unacceptable behavior that could materially affect the operation of the business. I felt it definitely fell into that category. Are you sure about that? He asked. Yes, I said, I am. Absolutely. I want it to be reorganized as a sole proprietorship if possible. I know we talked earlier about incorporating him as a limited liability company. Maybe now would be a good time to do that. Okay, I'll look into it, Jim said. It'll take a while, though. I know, I said. But I want the partnership dissolved as soon as possible, and I want my losses minimized as much as possible. Consider it done, my friend, he said. Thank you, I said, ending the conversation. I knew that under the terms of the agreement I would have to pay Gerald something to get him to leave the company, so the less I had to give him, the better. I knew Jim could handle it for me. A couple hours later, I got a call from Rhonda. I just wanted to let you know we're at the hotel in Vegas, she said, and I'm so ready for a weekend full of hot sex. Rhonda, before you do that, you should know that Gerald is HIV positive, I said. If you go through with this, you'll regret it for the rest of your life. Stop this nonsense and come home right now. If you do, then maybe, and I really mean maybe, we can fix our marriage. Oh, Ron, she said with a laugh. Are you still doing that? Come to your senses. This is going to happen. I'm going to let Gerald have me all weekend long. Rhonda, I'm warning you, I started to say, but she was already done talking. That's it, I warned her, but she refused to listen. The rest of my now ruined weekend was spent banishing Rhonda from my life. On Jim's advice, I went to the bank on Saturday morning and took care of everything there, paying off her credit card before canceling it. Over the weekend, I received 3 voicemails from Rhonda and several text messages. She was doing her best to piss me off. "Oh, yeah," she moaned in one of her voicemails. The other voice messages were very similar. I forwarded them all to Jim so he could use them as evidence of Rhonda's infidelity. I also forwarded them to Judy so she could use them in her divorce from Gerald. I called a locksmith, and he changed all the locks on the doors. I wasn't worried about keeping the house since I had bought it before we were married, and the mortgage was in my name only. I threw all her clothes and valuables into garbage bags and stuffed them into her car, leaving enough room for her to drive. I drove the car out of the garage and left it in the driveway. I pulled out all the pictures that had Rhonda in them. I smashed the large wedding portrait that hung over the fireplace before I put the scraps inside to burn. By the time I was done, there was no evidence that she had ever been in the place. After listening to her voice messages the next morning, I called her mother and told her we needed to talk. She invited me to lunch, so I went. After eating a sandwich, she asked me what was going on, and I told her everything. I even let her listen to the voice messages Rhonda had left. By the time I was done, she was inconsolable. "That stupid, really stupid girl," she said. "I can't believe she would do something like that to you. I'm so sorry, Ron. Of course, she can stay here until she gets back on her feet, but I'm going to set her skin on fire for this." "I'm sorry too, Mom," I told her. I'd always thought of Rhonda's mother as Mom, especially since my own mother had died of a stroke a few years before. "She'll need all the help and support you can give her." "Of course," she said, "but I'm still going to put her over my knee." I grinned and gave her a hug. "Please stay in touch, Ron," she said as we broke the hug. I promised I would and walked away. She was still wiping tears from her face as I left. From there, I went to a tavern that served the juiciest burgers and enjoyed one with a couple beers. Jim called me on Monday to tell me he'd done the paperwork, so I went to his office. Everything looked good, so I paid him in advance and left. The paperwork was due in court the next day, which was Tuesday. "Where would you like her to be notified?" Jim asked. "Preferably at her workplace," I said. "She humiliated me publicly, so I think it's only fair that I return the favor." "Okay," he said before I left. That afternoon, I received a couple more voicemails from Rhonda, the last one telling me she was on her way home. I laughed heartily at that one. Gerald dropped her off around 5:30 that evening and then drove off. Apparently, he was too cowardly to face me after what he had done. I waited and heard her come out onto the porch. I could hear her fumbling over the keys, but none of them worked. Finally, she rang the doorbell. I ignored it for a few minutes, and she started pounding on the door. "Let me in, damn it!" she yelled. I got up and headed for the door. I opened it and stepped outside. She looked at me before trying to go inside, but I stopped her. "What are you doing?" "I live here too." "No, you don't," I told her. "Not anymore. You gave up that right when you left Friday night." "But I told you I'd be back and we could talk it over if you still want to," she said. "And why is my car in the driveway? Why isn't it in the garage? And what are those bags in it?" "It's all your stuff, Rhonda," I said. "Like I said, you don't live here anymore." "Look, I know you're upset," she said. "We can talk about it if you want." "I wanted to talk to you on Friday, but you weren't interested, remember?" I asked. "I practically begged you to listen to me, but you flatly refused and insisted on spending the weekend with Gerald." "That's right," she said. "Since you screwed his wife, I figured I deserved a little revenge." "And what proof do you have that I had sex with Judy?" I asked. "Show me." She pulled out her phone and showed me a picture of me and Judy sitting at a table in a restaurant. "What is that?" she asked. "It's 2 people talking over dinner," I said. "There's no sex in that picture, and nothing happened between Judy and me. For that matter, I've never been with another woman since you and I got married." "Then why did you have dinner with her?" Rhonda asked. "Of course you expected something after that." "There you go, starting to make false assumptions again," I said. "What are you talking about?" she asked. "That's what I wanted to talk to you about on Friday, but you refused to listen to me," I said. "Tell me, did Gerald ever use a condom this weekend?" "Of course not," she said. "You know I hate condoms." "I see," I said. "So you were planning to kill me," I said. Her eyes widened. Of course not, she said. Where did you get that stupid idea? Do you remember a few months ago when he said he wasn't feeling well? I asked. That was just a few weeks after he'd gotten back from his trip back east. Yes, I remember, she said. I advised him to go to the doctor and get checked out, I told her. He never told me what the doctor said, but Judy found out that he tested positive for HIV. You want to know how she found out? I'll tell you. She found out because he infected her. She just recently tested positive. That's what we talked about at dinner that night. At the time he infected her, he didn't know he had it. But he sure as hell knew it last weekend when he slept with you. I handed her a copy of Gerald's test results that Judy had given me the night we had dinner. Rhonda's face turned white and her eyes widened. I even told you about it on Friday, but you refused to listen. Oh my God, she said, feeling nauseous. You were telling the truth. I'm going to be sick. She bent in half and threw up right in the front yard. I stood and watched as she threw up several times in the front yard. When she was done, she looked at me fearfully. I'm going to die, aren't I? She asked. I shrugged my shoulders. I'm not a doctor, so I don't know, I said. Judy said her doctor told her that it's not a death sentence like it was a few years ago, but it's still pretty severe. Anyway, I suggest you go see Dr. Barnes first thing in the morning and let him know. Ask him to run some tests on you. Maybe if he can catch it early enough, he can do something about it. But I know for a fact that our marriage is over. Where am I going to go? She asked, tears streaming down her face. Your mother said you could stay with her until you get back on your feet, I said. My mother? You told my mother? She asked, shocked. Yes, I said. She deserves to know the truth, don't you think so? I guess so, she said. And sometime this week you'll be getting divorce papers at work, I told her. Please no, she said. I don't want a divorce. Can't we work it out? No, I said. We probably could have done it if you'd talked to me on Friday instead of leaving me and spending the weekend in Vegas with him. But you just had to do it your way. You made your bed, Rhonda. Now you can lie in it. What were you doing with Judy at that restaurant? She asked. I already told you. Talking, I said. She got her test results and wanted to talk to me. She asked if I had any inkling that he was positive. Of course, I told her the truth, that I didn't know that. I tried to find a way to help the two of them get through this, but it seems that Gerald decided to follow her. He took pictures of us at the restaurant. Naturally, when you saw them, you made your usual false assumptions, and here we are. I hope it was all worth it to you. Please, can't you just give me another chance? She begged. I'm dying here. I've been dying since you left me Friday night, I said. But I love you, she exclaimed. Yes, that's right, I thought. Don't you love me at all? Love you? I asked. Right now I don't even like you. Now get off my bed. I went back inside and slammed the door shut, locking it behind me. I looked out the window and saw her, sobbing, kneeling on the lawn. She looked completely broken and miserable, but at that moment I didn't care. Eventually, she turned around and slowly wandered to her car, still crying. While I watched, she backed out of the driveway and drove away, still crying. The next day I got to the office early, hoping to catch Gerald when he arrived. I had already advised security to confiscate his badge when he walked in, and there were a couple security officers waiting outside his office. When he arrived, he gave me a smirk, but lost it when he saw the officers. What's all this about? He asked. They're here to confiscate your badge and make sure you don't take any of the company's property with you when you leave, I told him. Leave? He asked. I'm not going anywhere. Wrong answer, I told him. As of today, the partnership is dissolved. You don't work here anymore. That's bullshit, he said. You can't do that. Read the agreement we both signed, I said, throwing a copy on his desk. I highlighted the relevant clause. The dissolution of the partnership was filed this morning, and the company is temporarily reorganizing as a sole proprietorship. I'm giving you 15 minutes to pick up your trash and get off the property before I order you out. Is this all because I screwed your wife over the weekend? He asked. In part, I said, it's also for knowingly infecting her with HIV, which I'm told is a felony in this state. What? he asked. I saw your test results, I said. Judy showed them to me. That's what we discussed that day at the restaurant. She told me that you had infected her too. I had planned to make you a silent partner so you could keep your health insurance and still make an income. But what you did this weekend was out of line. You know you're infected, but you decided to spend the weekend with Rhonda without telling her. That's illegal in this state. The two of you planned the whole thing, except she didn't know you were HIV positive. In my opinion, what you did violates the terms of our partnership agreement. I was thinking of giving you severance pay, but in light of your actions, I've changed my mind. Now get out. You can't do that, he exclaimed. I'm going to sue you over this. So God help me, I'm going to start spreading rumors that you've slept with half the female staff here, threatening their jobs if they don't go along with what you want. Really? I asked. You would deliberately slander me in the community out of revenge, on top of deliberately infecting my wife with HIV so she could infect me? Damn right, he said. By the time I'm done, you won't have any business at all. I smiled and pulled a tape recorder out of my pocket. I pressed the button and played him our conversation. I think this should add a few million to the lawsuit and help secure a conviction, I said. Not to mention the fact that you made your statement in front of at least 2 witnesses, right? I asked, looking at the 2 guards who smiled and nodded. I looked at my watch. You know, I used to think you were my best friend. I also used to think you were pretty smart. Now I see that my initial assessment of you was wrong. You have 10 minutes to pack your things and get the hell off my property. I looked at the guards before speaking again. Keep an eye on him. Make sure he doesn't touch his computer and only takes what belongs to him. Yes, sir, Mr. Hastings, one of the guards said. Gerald gathered his things in front of the guards. On his way out, he looked into my office. I'm sorry, Ron, he said. Just go away, I said. Get out. After Gerald left, I called a staff meeting. The main office was crowded, but I felt they deserved to know that there would be a change. I told them that Gerald was no longer with the company and the partnership had been dissolved. I assured them that this change would not affect their work in the long term, but might cause some short-term disruptions. One of the employees asked why Gerald had left, but all I was willing to say was that it was a personal matter. The next few weeks passed like a blur. On Thursday, Rhonda was served divorce papers at her workplace, which caused a lot of gossip. Her mother told me that she went to the doctor on Tuesday, but it would be a while before she got the results of her tests. Thankfully, Rhonda hasn't been inundating me with calls or texts. It seems she finally realized that she had made a huge mistake that would affect her for the rest of her life. Realizing there would be no reconciliation, she signed the papers. Jim told me the divorce would be final in 90 days. Judy filed for divorce from Gerald on charges of cheating on her spouse. She told me that he was living in a motel room he rented for a week until he found something else. But he had another problem. After Rhonda's visit, Dr. Barnes reported Gerald to the authorities. From what I had learned, the state we live in requires people with HIV to inform their partners before engaging in any sexual activity. Since Rhonda said that Gerald never informed her, he could get up to 20 years in prison. I also learned that this was one of those laws that many prosecutors were reluctant to enforce because there was too great a chance of a negative reaction. But the local authorities decided to pursue Gerald based on Rhonda's testimony. About a week after he was kicked out of his home, police showed up at the motel where he was staying and took him into custody. Concerned that he might be a danger to the general population, he was placed in solitary confinement. Gerald's trial turned into something of a circus. The prosecutor portrayed him as a violent, manipulative son of a bitch who deliberately intended to infect me, his partner, with the disease by first infecting Rhonda. Rhonda testified, as did I. Judy testified as well. The prosecutor also played the audio tape I had recorded in my office, putting Gerald in an even worse position. It didn't take long for the jury to reach a guilty verdict. Disgusted by what he heard, the judge sentenced him to the maximum allowable under the law, 20 years in state prison. But Gerald's troubles were far from over. He was now in the midst of divorce proceedings as well as civil litigation. After Judy's divorce was finalized, she sold her home and moved out of the area, Rhonda contacted me a few days before our divorce was finalized and asked if I would have dinner with her. After thinking about it, I agreed. I felt it was time to get it over with. We met at a quiet restaurant where we enjoyed one last meal. "I hope you're not too scared or embarrassed to be seen with me," she said. "We're not going to exchange any body fluids, so it shouldn't be a problem," I told her half-jokingly. "I got the results of my test," she said. "I'm sick." "I'm not surprised, but I'm sorry to hear that," I told her. "It's not your fault," she said. "You tried to warn me, but I wouldn't listen. It's a mistake I'll be paying for the rest of my life." "What is the doctor doing?" I asked. "He's putting me on antiretroviral therapy," she said. "It will never be cured, but he tells me that I can live a pretty normal life if I take the medicine every day. Of course, I had to let my boss know about it. He lets me work remotely so I can work from home, and my mom says I can stay with her as long as I need to." "That's good to hear," I said. "My lawyer is also filing a lawsuit against Gerald," she said. "I'm told it's largely due to his conviction, but foreclosure could be a problem since he's in jail." "I see," I told her. "Well, I happen to know that his share of the 401k was pretty substantial, even after subtracting Judy's share. She also sold their house, so you might be able to get half of it. Have you talked to her lately?" "I have a contact with her," she said. "She's not in the area right now, but we still communicate from time to time. I'll mention it to her and see what she says." "What happened to you, Rhonda?" I asked after a while. "I don't understand it. I wanted to have children with you, to spend the rest of my life with you." "I don't know," she said quietly. "When Gerald showed me those pictures of you and Judy, I was blown away. I just knew you were having sex with her. I'm really ahead of the shark on this one, aren't I?" "Just a little bit," I said. "But why didn't you just talk to me?" "I was angry," she said. "I didn't want to hear anything you had to say. Judy tried to warn me too, but I figured she was in cahoots with you and would say anything to stop me. I even told you that Friday about Gerald," I said. "Twice. I hoped you took the hint." "Honestly, I didn't want to hear anything you had to say," she told me. "And now I'm paying for it. I'll be paying for it for the rest of my life. Will you ever be able to forgive me for being so stupid?" "I don't know," I said. "Right now, it's all I can say to be polite to you." "I'm grateful to you at least for that," she said. "I know this must be hard for you. How are you holding up?" "I'm coping," I told her. "I'm still very busy with my business. Now that Gerald's gone, my workload has doubled. So there's no shortage of things to do." "Are there any women in your life?" she asked. "No," I said. "I'm not looking for a relationship. It probably won't happen anytime soon. Once bitten, twice cautious, you know." "I'm sorry," she said. "I've learned something from all this myself," I said. "What is it?" she asked. "Never trust anyone," I said. She looked at me shocked. "I knew Gerald for years before I met you. I thought I knew him. I had no idea he was capable of what he did. And what I found out about him during their divorce is frankly nauseating. And what you did certainly didn't help." "I'm sorry," she said. "Yeah, well, that's the way it is," I said. "I see you're still wearing your rings," I added, looking at her left hand. "Technically, we're still married," she said. "At least for a few more days. If you want them back, you can have them, but I was hoping you'd let me keep them." "I don't need them," I said. "I'd just take them off and sell them anyway. Why would you want them?" "As a reminder," she said, "of something I once had and then threw away." "They're yours," I said. "Do what you want with them." "Thank you," she said quietly, a tear rolling down her cheek. "I'd better go now," I said. "I have a lot to do tonight. Say hi to your mom for me and good luck." "I will," she said. "And thanks, Ron. I'm really sorry about all this." "Yeah," I said, standing up. "Me too, Rhonda. Goodbye." I heard her sobbing as I walked away. I wasn't as angry as I had been when it first happened, but I was still sad. It's not easy to break up a 10-year relationship with someone you thought you were going to spend the rest of your life with. Epilogue. Work progressed, and within a year things had settled down to a steady rhythm. I had a lot of opportunities, but I chose not to date or have a relationship. I still had serious trust issues after what Rhonda and Gerald had done. For me, life consisted of working, eating, and sleeping. I had no personal life at all. A year and a half after my divorce, Denise, my secretary, introduced me to her younger sister, Angela, at a corporate event. She was a couple years younger than me and had just gone through a divorce from her husband, who had left her for another woman. We started dating, taking things step by step, slowly. We had both been burned by our previous spouses and still had some trust issues, but as we spent more time together, our trust in each other grew. We dated several times over the course of a month before we ended up spending the night together in my bed. A few months later, I proposed to her and she said yes. Our wedding was set for the spring, followed by a 5-day cruise in the Caribbean. We extended an invitation to Rhonda's mother, but we don't know if she plans to attend. I am still hurting from what Rhonda and Gerald did, but Angela has done a marvelous job of healing the scars. I, too, did my best to help her heal, and I certainly look forward to spending the rest of my life with her. When I think of Angela, I often think of the old saying that goes, "Sometimes the bad things that happen in our lives set us right on the path to the best thing that will ever happen to us." According to the Centers for Disease Control, 37 states still have laws criminalizing intentional exposure to HIV.